And anybody else that's going to be joining in, I have everybody on mute. So if you have any questions or anything to add to this or mention, just go ahead and type in the chat box here. And the first thing to actually a couple of sort of announcements, if you will, before we get started here. And by the way, tonight's session won't be too long because we basically, especially for you on campus students, there's nothing really new this week. I mean, everybody turned in the blogs last week. Online students, you have the last discussion, of course, and to continue to work on Project 3. We won't go into the particulars with Project 3 again. If you want to kind of refresh on that, you can just check out the archive from last time because we went into depth and I went over kind of Kim's example of that. And I know that for you on campus students, Kim probably did a case study of what she did uh, basically for Project 3. And you can check that out in the archives. But we'll still talk about Project 3 a little bit here. And but before we get started, though, just a couple of important announcements. Hopefully everybody is aware and everybody had a chance to check out the announcements that Full Sail 3.0 or FSO 3.0 is going to be here next month, which means, I mean, when I say next month, I mean starting on Monday of next week, basically, which means that it's a different platform entirely. It's very similar. Supposedly, the idea was to make improvements, and so there's fewer glitches. You will notice, though, there's a couple of minor things that me and Kim noticed, actually. The first thing is that there's no longer any announcements. Everything is put in, and there's no references either. Everything is put into assignments, which is no big deal. It's just that the announcements will still be there, but they'll be under like a different name. So for whatever class you have, there might be an assignment that'll say something like announcements or something like that. Or there might be, an assignment that has like references or resources that you can check out. So that's just one minor thing. Also, with the FSO 3.0, just remember that I believe, and I'm not sure for you guys, but I know that for the faculty, we actually have to go to a different address. We're used to going to, what's it, faculty.online.fullsail.edu or something like that. And we have to start using a different address. It's something like faculty.fso3.com or something like that, or I forget offhand what it is, but it's a different address. So it's probably going to be different for you guys as well. So in the announcements, you'll see for this month, you'll see the important announcements. There's a couple of documents that we put in the references. We couldn't put them in the announcements itself, but if you check out the announcements, you'll see an announcement that says go and check out the references, right? Because there's a couple of important documents that you can take a look at for regarding FSO 3 for starting next week. So just a reminder about that. And so don't just log in on Monday with your typical, the FSO that you've been used to going to because it might not work, right? Technically, I think it's supposed to work for a little while, but the point though is that all of your new class materials, that's the place where you'll be turning in all your work, will be on a different platform. So it's FSO 3.0. So just check out the references if you haven't. Also, I just put this up for the online and on campus class. If you go to your, let me pull this up here. Let me show how it would look on your end. If you go to your page right now, you will notice in the important announcements, okay, first of all, there's just what I talked about right here, right? FSO 3.0. So check out the announcements in the references, right? And here's an announcement from before that about FSO 3.0 coming soon. When we say coming soon again, it's starting next week. But also, if you notice down here, the oh, you know what? Well, it's at the very bottom down here. I meant to put it up here at the top. But anyways, if you go down here to the bottom here, um, you will notice that there's this announcement YouTube page with links to resources. Basically, if you go to this page, if you just copy and paste this address, I won't do that now, but if you copy and paste, well, actually, I'll just show you what it leads to. It leads to this, right? This is a page. This is our YouTube page. This has all of our podcasts from Full Sail iTunes University. So some of you may have checked these out already, but these also will have our go-to sessions, right? So if you miss any of those, and all these resources, again, these are all on our iTunes University page, but we made a YouTube page so you can check out these if you want. And so you could check those out whenever you want. And keep this URL because some of these documents, like stuff about how to do a query letter. I know that obviously you guys already did project one, but here's another. If you want to keep this page, bookmark this page if you want, and you can always go back to it later. Even when you're out of our class, right? There's information about a treatment, about formatting the screenplay, about a game design document, a press kit, a book proposal, how to pitch, guide to literary agents before you contact an agent, self-publishing video, part 1, part 2, what to look for in a print-on-demand company, which of course for you online students, that was your discussion last week, right? But here's a video up on that. The differences between vanity press and print-on-demand, cloud computing, stealth marketing, which we'll talk about a little bit tonight, and press release and distribution one-sheet information. So you can check that out if you want. Okay, so for tonight's session though, I want to start real quickly by just going over chapter 26, actually. I'm sorry, actually, we'll cover it. We're going to cover actually 23 through 27, actually. But real quickly, I know this is kind of review for you on-campus students because we kind of went over this yesterday a little bit. But just with chapter 20, actually, we'll get to chapter 24 here in a second. But let me start here with chapters 22 and 23. And basically, what these chapters are about, I mean, obviously, hopefully you've read the text by now, and or you will be doing it this week, right? But these chapters are just about how the third wave is here. In other words, that we don't have the first wave or the second wave anymore. We have the third wave, which is this idea of self-publishing, right? You don't have to rely on agents to get your work published anymore. You can actually do it yourself. And we have digital magazines. So the prototype of this would have been what's called Aspen Magazine, right? This is back in like the 60s, and you had all these kind of avant-garde artists contributing to it. Like you had people like Andy Warhol, you had musicians like John Lennon, people like that would contribute. And that was kind of the prototype of what you see today. Now, back in the day, Aspen Magazine, that was kind of like an underground magazine, right? But today we have lots of quote unquote underground magazines, but they take the form of digital, right? You don't have to be successful anymore in the publishing industry by just doing physical copies, right? You can do digital. So like Wired magazine, and we're seeing this with a lot of different magazines, not just Wired, but a lot of magazines are switching to an all digital format. And with these digital magazines, they have the capability to embed video, to embed more videos, more links, stuff like that. And with digital magazines, people can download them. The only problem with this when this started, and by the way, this is back in 2010. This is not necessarily the case anymore, but with when 2010, when they started having these things, one of the problems was that it took a long time to download. But the good thing is that we're kind of moving past that. That's no longer such an issue these days. So this opportunity for digital publishing is there if you want. And I was telling the class yesterday, the on-campus class, that there are programs out there where you can actually, forget about books for a second. Like, let's just say that, that's a big endeavor. You might not be able to write a whole book, but if you have something like a short story, and you want to get that out there are programs out there that will allow you to write short stories. And there's one in particular, I forget the name offhand, but there's different programs out there though. You can find them if you just do a Google search. But there's programs out there that will kind of take the form of, if you guys remember the Choose Your Own Adventure books, where you can create a short story and then you could have like choices that the reader makes, and then that will take them to a different path and a different path. And it's kind of fun to do. And you can do a short story like that and get it on for free. You can get that on iTunes and just sell it for like 99 cents or something like that. Now there are other fees along with that to use this program, so there's a small fee, but nonetheless though, these opportunities are there for you. I mean, maybe not enough, you probably can't make enough money to earn a living this way, but I mean, if you want some extra cash on the side, you might want to take a look at some of these sort of self-publishing, sort of digital opportunities that you have out there, right? Also, well, let me kind of skip past this for a second here. and get to, and I mean, here's some, by the way, here's some examples of do-it-yourself magazines, right? There's MagCloud, emagazines.com, and these are some opportunities that you might want to, or some sources that you might want to take a look at. So once again, I know I'm kind of going through this fast, but this is all in your references. This is chapters 22 and 23 that I'm going through right now. So you can check these sites out later if you want. And there's some videos that we can't play here, because it doesn't work with these go-to sessions. The audio doesn't work for some reason. But there's also enhanced books, right? It's going to be interesting to see what happens in the future of textbooks, right? Because you have a lot of people out there that want to write books, but in addition to having books, they also want to embed videos and to embed links that will take the readers to other sources or other sites out there. And these things weren't available a few years ago, but they are certainly out there now. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with these enhanced books, and not just textbooks, but I mean just books in general, right? And one of these sources that you can find is what's known as Buke, if I'm pronouncing that right, or Buke. And we have a video there. I can't really play it, but it's this idea of enhanced books. So what this company does, this Buke, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, is they take like old classic novels, like classic literature, and they sort of make enhancements to it, right? They show video and stuff like that, and animation, things like that. And then also, of course, you guys have probably heard of iAuthor, right? That's from Apple. And what this allows you to do is to go in and make your own book. And of course, you guys with your computers, you guys should all have Pages, right? I don't know if you've ever used Pages for any of your classes, but some of these programs are kind of similar to what you would see like Pages, right? And it allows you to write a book. And in fact, you guys will have Bill Thompson in your final project class, and I believe he actually used this iAuthor program to write one of his books, actually. And this is a really easy program to use, and it once again allows you to. And I wish I could show you the video here, but we can't. But you guys in the on campus class will see this tomorrow. And for those of you online class, if you want to once again take a look at the references and go to the PowerPoint slides for chapters 22 and 23, you can watch all these videos that we're talking about here. But this program is pretty cool because it's easy to use. It allows you to just drag photos in, and the text will move around the photos and things like that. You can embed videos, things like that. So that's chapters 22 and 23. Now, chapter 24 and 25 here talks about the micro ebook. And I'll just kind of go through this real fast. What I want to get to is this author named Amanda Hawking. Now, because she was kind of in your position. I mean, imagine yourself or imagine her taking this class. Now, what you guys did for projects 1 and 2, that's what she did. She wrote a query letter to agents. She tried to find an agent. She had her book proposals ready. And now, in her situation, she didn't start off, I don't believe, by writing full-length novels. She wrote kind of shorter books, what they call novellas. And so that's what she did. And she basically had what they call micro ebooks, right? But she couldn't find an agent. So in other words, she did exactly what you guys did for projects 1 and 2. She tried to find an agent. She tried to write a query letter to an agent, but she got rejected. So what she did is what you guys are doing now for project 3. She said, okay, I'm going to do it myself. I'm not going to rely on the old publishing model. I'm not going to rely on agents. I'm just going to go ahead and use a print-on-demand company. That's what you guys are doing for project 3. Now, she used CreateSpace, but that's not an endorsement. There's lots of print-on-demand companies out there that are perfectly fine. It's just a matter of you explaining which print-on-demand company that you are going to use and why you chose it, right? And that's what she did. She used CreateSpace, and she started selling her books for, just I think basically 99 cents to like $3, right? Because these were like full-length novels. These were short books, novellas. So a novella would be like kind of a little bit longer than a short story, but then not long enough to be considered a novel. So it's kind of that in-between area. And she sold these for about 99 cents to $3, real cheap. Now remember, she was doing ebooks. So she didn't rely on physical copies. So it's not like she had to pay somebody to print out the physical copies, which would cost extra money to print, for printing costs and things like that. But she just relied on digital. And sure enough, though, she was able to get a following, and she made something like, I forget offhand what the figures are. Um, but with let me get to the second bullet point here in a second, though. But basically, though, she sold hundreds of thousands of copies of her ebooks, right? And then she gained a following, and now she's got like a very, very lucrative deal with a publisher. Now it's kind of funny because she couldn't get a publisher to begin with; they all turned her down. But now that she's popular and successful, oh, now they all come to her, right? Now they all want her. Um, and now, like I was telling the class yesterday, her last book, or one of her books, is actually being adapted into a film later this year and it's being adapted by the person who wrote District 9 from last year or the year before. So, and now this Amanda Hawking, now she's a multimillionaire, basically, just by starting out by self-publishing, right? And once again, not to sound like a broken record, but this is something that you couldn't do in the industry about 5 years ago. So the thing that we mentioned too with the last go-to session is the fact that a lot of these print on demand companies, they will give you a better deal than your agent would doing it as you did in projects 1 and 2. The projects 1 and 2, you're going to get about 15% of royalties, right? Music maybe a little bit higher, but with books especially, you're talking about 15%. Well, a good print on demand company will give you a much, much higher royalty percentage. We're talking like 40% for physical copies, somewhere around in the area of 70% or more for digital. In other words, ebooks or books that you can sell through Kindle, right? 70%. And for those of you on the music side, there are some companies, like I believe TuneCore, will they will allow you to keep 100% of your royalties. Now there is a annual fee though, that's how they make money, right? There's still a fee that you have to pay each year. But in terms of what you sell, you could keep almost everything that you sell. You can keep almost 100% of the royalties. And of course, every print on demand company is going to be a little bit different. Maybe CD Baby is a little bit different. Um, at one point, I think CD Baby was like 91%. But these things kind of change and fluctuate. But the point, though, is that a print on demand company will get you a higher percentage of royalties, meaning that you can actually make more money per unit sold, right? And that's basically what Amanda Hawking did. And so, once again, there's an interview with her, and you can find other interviews with her. You don't just have to like look up this one, but you can probably just go to YouTube and just type in Amanda Hawking, and there's probably some other interviews and stories on her that you can look up if you want to. And there's some other examples as well. Um, with chapter 25, it's just about mass collaboration, and it's kind of funny. I will explain. I will tell you that in academics as well, this idea of mass collaboration is gaining traction. It's becoming a real popular thing. What I mean by that is that even if you go to like an academic journal these days, a scholarly journal, it seems rare, like at least a lot rarer than it used to be, to find an article that was written by a single person. Almost all of the articles you're going to, not almost all, but I mean very often, the articles that you find when looking up, you know, stories or essays from an academic journal are going to be written by at least two, sometimes three or four or five people, right? And what's interesting with this in the academic world too is that you will, once you dig deeper and you do some research on this, you will find a lot of times that the authors never even met each other in real life. They just collaborate through the use of technology and programs like Skype, or even like what we're doing right now, right, with the GoToMeeting and things like that. So the point of chapter 25 is just to kind of introduce this idea of mass collaboration and the fact that you can collaborate with other people these days because of technology. And you can work with people as if they're on the smallest village scale. There's a scholar that is, some of you may have heard of him, but Marshall McLuhan, right? He was a Canadian scholar. He had this idea of the global village. And it's kind of interesting because he was talking about this back in like the 1960s. In fact, he introduced this idea in a book called The Gutenberg Galaxy, which was written in like 1963. And he was talking at first about the television and the telephone, but really he was very prophetic because he died in 1980. But really, this idea of the global village really applies today in today's world with the internet, 34 years later after he died. This idea that we are living in this global village, meaning that you can communicate with people halfway across the world as if they're right next to you, right? As if they're on the smallest village scale. And and of course, with Wikinomics, with wikis, right? We see this all the time where people will go to a site like Wikipedia or something else, and they are able to kind of add to what other people have written, right? And this idea of mass collaboration, and there's some other videos if you want. Kim will probably show you guys this tomorrow for you on campus students. The Adjustment Bureau. I'm not sure if you guys ever saw that movie. Uh, it was an okay movie, but it was kind of interesting because when they were doing the marketing for this, they had this idea of how everybody can send in their photos, and what they did is kind of like a montage video of it, and it just kind of exemplifies this idea of mass collaboration, right? So you can check out that video if you want to later, and and I'll just tell you the story behind this real quickly to make a long story short. You guys can check out the video if you want, or you could check out the story. This is a story, but there's also a video in this story somewhere as well. But in this story, they basically had this idea of let's solve a problem and let's put it out there for computer experts to solve it. And the people that designed the study thought, oh well, no way that it's going to take people forever to solve this problem. And I can't remember offhand if it was like a medical dilemma or if it was some other type of problem. But basically, though, the researchers just said, okay, let's put this problem out there and let's see how fast people can solve it. And they figured, oh, maybe a couple months. They were stunned because almost immediately, because of mass collaboration, people working together, by the way, for not for any money, I don't think, but just by people working together, they were able to solve the problem within like record time. But it just goes to show that this idea of the global village with mass collaboration, with people working together, whether we're talking about solving a scientific problem or whether we're talking about trying to sell a product, mass collaboration is very, very helpful these days, right? And that's kind of what chapters 25 and 20 or 24 and 25 are about, or chapter 25 at least, okay? And in terms of the last chapters, I'll just kind of skip over. I won't pull those up directly from the um, from the resources here for chapters 26. But basically, though, I will just mention some of the highlights between the last few chapters of the book. One of the things to keep in mind is this idea of what we call social nomics, right? The idea of using social media to not only talk to your friends about the latest restaurant that you went to or the latest movie that you saw or whatever it might be, because when we think of social media, that tends to be what most people think, right? They think of, well, I'm just going to connect with my friends, and there's value to that, right? There's ways that you can connect with people that you never thought you'd ever see again or talk to again, right? People from high school that you may have known, but then fell out of contact with, things like that. All those things are good. But one of the things to keep in mind in our last few chapters of the book, when we talk about social nomics, is this idea that you can use social media in order to sell products, right? And this one example here, if you want to check out this video, this is a video that Frontline did a couple years ago, but it was all about how these protesters in Egypt, if you guys remember the dictator in Egypt, Mubarak, who got ousted. But anyways, though, the people in Egypt they had to fight this dictator, and they couldn't really use the media because the Egyptian media, at the time at least, was authoritarian, meaning that they only kind of broadcast whatever the government wanted to, right? So the people couldn't really use the media to get out their message. They couldn't use newspapers. It was difficult to go door to door to get people to rise up and start a riot and a protest. But what they did do, though, is social media. They actually used Facebook and things like Twitter, and they were able to basically start a political revolution. So whether we're talking about business or even politics, social media can be a very powerful thing. So just keep that in mind, right? And a guy named Eric Qualman wrote a book about this called Socialnomics. This is back in 2009. I think he's probably got another edition, or maybe two different editions out now, in 2014. But it was called Socialnomics, and he just talks about how you can use the internet in order to sell products and to market. And I mean, obviously, you guys are aware. I mean, whatever your project is for Project 3, for your marketing strategy, you definitely want to emphasize the fact that you will have like an official website or at least a Facebook page or something like that, Twitter, Instagram, things like that, right? And also, just real quickly, for those of you on the game side or anybody that's interested in creating apps, this little kid here, Robert Ney, you could check out the video later if you want, where they interview him. But basically, he designed an app that was, for the time, at the time, one of the most popular apps on the iTunes store. Now, he sold it for free at first, but they actually did the math later. It turns out that had he charged like just 99 cents for it, for some app, for some little game that you can play like on your Facebook page or on your phone or something like that, had he charged just 99 cents, he would have made almost like $500,000 or something like that. So if a little kid can do this, I'm sure that you can as well, right? But the whole point of this, though, is this idea of the independent artist, whether we're talking about a little kid making an app or a game, or whether we're talking about an author named Amanda Hawking, or whether we're talking about a different author, a filmmaker, um, a person that wants to create a TV show. 5 years ago, you couldn't really do that. You couldn't really be successful. You had to rely on what you guys did for projects 1 and 2, but now we're seeing more power given to the independent artist and creator. And that's what Project 3 is about, is how you can do it yourself. And these are some success stories that we have for you. And the last thing in chapter 27 here, and I apologize because I know, Vanessa, you guys are probably going to go over this again tomorrow, so it's going to be a little bit repetitive. But the last chapter here for 27 is about webisodes. Now, this is just one example here. The show is called Imaginary Bitches. Sorry for the language, but that's the name of that's the title, right? And what they did here is they had professional actors and directors and writers, and they were going to make a TV show, right? And in fact, this girl here, I forget her name offhand, but she's a fairly, maybe not well-known actress, but I mean, she was a professional actress. In fact, she's actually in the first American Pie movie, if you guys remember that movie. She's in there briefly, um, in a funny scene, but I won't go into the details. But anyways, but she's in that first scene, or first American Pie movie. Um, she's one of the girls at Stifler's party. But anyways, though, they did this TV show and they tried to pitch it to various networks, and all the networks turned them down. So they said, well, we already kind of made this, we already have it developed, and we don't just want to give up on it. How about if we just put it on the web, right? And we try to make money through advertising dollars. And sure enough, the creators were able to do that and actually turn a profit, right? And they actually had about at least maybe 3 or 4 seasons, I think. And these are just kind of mini episodes. We're talking like 5-minute episodes, but they were able to make money on advertising dollars, right? They didn't charge anything, but another example for those of you that might be interested in video games, you guys are probably familiar with the Angry Video Game Nerd, if you've heard of them. You can just do a Google search on him if you haven't, but be warned, though, he's very, very filthy in terms of his language. But anyways, though, he kind of started this website just looking at these old classic video games, right, and just making fun of them about how bad they were. And he began to gain a fan following. And I don't know in terms of how much money he makes, but I mean, he's got to be doing pretty well, because if you go to his website, he's got lots of ads on there. And in fact, they're actually coming out with an Angry Video Game Nerd movie later this year. So it's kind of funny. But anyways, that's another example, though, about how this guy basically did these webisodes, right, on his website. And he just did them for fun, but he is able to actually be successful doing it this way. Once again, this is not to sound like a broken record, but this is something that you couldn't do before, but now you can do thanks to self-publishing and, like I said, more power given to the independent artist, right? So, and by the way, there's the website too if you want to check it out, or you can just go on Google and just type in Imaginary Bitches, like web series or something like that, and that'll be on there. And so, okay, now let's get into the assignments, and I'll show you, once again, just in case you missed last week's go-to session, I won't go into as much detail this time as much as in terms of the assignment, but I will show you some examples this week. But like I said, if you haven't started project 3 yet, you still have until Sunday to do it. But if you haven't started it yet, and you want to, and you're just still looking for ideas, just go ahead and go to our reference page or our YouTube page now, and just go ahead and take a look at our last go-to session from week 3, because that kind of goes into maybe some of more of the specifics for all of the parts. But pretty much though, if you look at the assignment and the instructions, and if you look at that, it's called business strategy template, I believe, that's in the references, or actually that's attached to the assignment, I think. If you look at that, that has pretty good explanations for all the sections that you need. Just make sure to include all of those sections, right? So for those of you online students, though, let's take a look here at the discussion. The discussion for this week is just to talk about your own personal media consumption habits. How have they changed in recent years? For example, like I can tell you that I used to buy physical copies of DVDs all the time, right? But I quit doing that about 3 or 4 years ago. The reason why is because I started to ask, what's the point, right? Because if you have a Netflix account, you can either watch videos instantly through streaming. If you have any kind of like device, if you have like a Nintendo Wii, if you have a PS3 or an Xbox One or even an Xbox 360, you can connect with Netflix on your TV, right? You can download movies instantly if you have a Netflix account. Or you could also, like, anytime that let's just say that they don't have something streaming, then you could simply just put it on your Netflix list, the disc, and then 2 days later you have it, right? So there's really, at least in my estimation, and again, I could be in the minority, but I don't find the need to buy physical DVDs anymore, right? So that might be something that you might want to talk about. And I know that some of you on the music side, same thing. Every month we have lots of people that talk about how they used to buy CDs, but they don't buy CDs anymore because what's the point? Why buy a CD that costs $10 that has 13 or 14 songs on there when the artist only made maybe one or two songs on there, that instead of paying $10 for all 13 songs, two good songs and 11 bad songs, why don't you just buy each of the good songs for 99 cents on iTunes, right? So we have lots of people that will talk about that, right? Do you read physical books anymore? Do you read ebooks? I know that in terms of textbooks, I know I know that pretty much all your classes now are requiring you to take the codes each month to get your ebook, but they don't give you physical copies anymore. Even the mastery class, we used to give the students books now, but from what I hear now, they're only getting versions of that, and maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing. And again, I've heard it both ways. I mean, one of the good things with ebooks is that you don't have the space, right? You don't have to carry around your books. And two, the cool thing with like Kindle is that you could actually write in notes in the side. Not that you couldn't do that with a physical copy as well, but I mean, with Kindle, you can actually do a search feature. And let's just say that you have like a textbook, and let's just say that you're looking for some historical term. Let's just say let's just say that the textbook is on like famous world history leaders or world leaders in history, and you need to find information on Napoleon, right? Instead of having to go through the table of contents and looking through the book and maybe even going to the index, you can just right at the top on your Kindle or your whatever e-reader you have, you could just type in a search, and then you can find every single page that Napoleon's on and things like that, right? So that's some of the advantages, some of the disadvantages that I think a lot of people still prefer the physical copies of their material, right? They like to hold it in their hands, they like to flip the pages, things like that. So again, what are some of the advantages? What are some of the disadvantages between physical and digital, right? And like, what's the big picture that you see going forward in the future with publishing and distribution? Do you see this as kind of a fad, meaning that last year I think ebooks outsold physical books for the first time, and maybe not the first time, but I think that ebooks are selling more than physical books these days. And of course, you see this with the erosion of stores like Barnes and Noble and Borders. Um, I don't mean that Barnes and Noble is going to be gone completely forever, but you're seeing fewer and fewer of their stores, right? In fact, I remember a few years ago there used to be one of those bookstores, either Borders or Barnes and Noble, down in Maitland, and they took that out, right? So we're seeing less in terms of that. And where do you see this going though in the future? Do you think that people will continue to buy ebooks, or do you think that physical books will make a comeback? So that's the discussion that you have to do for this week, right? So, okay, before we get to the attendance questions, though, let's take a look here at Project 3 and some student examples, right? So I apologize. I was thinking that I had a video game example, but I don't here. But let's just take a look here at some examples, some student examples for Project 3. Now, this is from last month. Now, this is really, really elaborate and extensive. You don't have to go into this much detail that this student did. But I think that she's actually doing this for real, so she uh, took this assignment very, very seriously, and she had a lot done already. But you can see here, she's got a table of contents. You don't really need a table of contents, right? But let's just kind of take a look here, just glancing through some of the stuff that she wrote. So first of all, she's got an executive summary. Um, in fact, actually, this example might not be a good one to show you because this is really, really long, and you don't have to write 20 pages like she did. But anyways, she's got an executive summary. She's got a company description, the mission statements, company description, what the product is, and she even breaks it up into subsections or subheadings, which you don't really have to do. But manufacturing and distribution. She's got her marketing and promotion strategy here. And some of this too, I think, was taken from the branding class that you guys had before too, in terms of like positioning. You don't really need to do this, but she actually has a positioning strategy. But let me show you a different example because you can see here that she did 18 or 19 pages, which you don't really have to do. Let me show you a different example. Let's, for those of you in the music, let's take a look here at this example. Okay. The thing that I want to emphasize, and again, if you listen to the last go-to session, this is kind of review, but when we talk here about the mission statements, this is one mistake here that I'm looking, and I see that this student made a mistake with the mission statements. Not that this isn't a good example for Project 3, because he does a pretty good job here, but the mission statement is not the mission for the artist. It's not the mission statement for your business. The mission statement is the mission of the product, the project. Meaning that if you are doing a book, what is the mission of the book, right? Is the book going to inform people about the dangers of unsafe driving, for example? Is the book going to inform people about some important social issue like domestic violence or something like that? Is the book meant to entertain little kids? Is the same thing with music, right? What is the goal of the music project itself? Not the goal of the artist, not the goal of the company, but the goal of the particular CD or collection of music. Like, what do you want to do with the music? Same thing. And now, music is a little bit tricky because you have to kind of be creative in terms of defining what the mission of the music is. But that's okay because you guys are pretty good creatively. So have fun with that. But don't just say like the mission is just to make money or something like that. If you're a true artist, you don't just want to make money, you want to make a statement, right? And that's what you're doing here for the mission statement, is to talk about what is the goal of your music, or those of you on the film side, what is the goal of your film, right? Do you want to, again, bring awareness about an important issue? Do you want to, for example, like, let's just say that you are doing, like, let's just take Quentin Tarantino, for example. Like, you could say, if you look at like Django Unchained from last year, or you could take a look at Grindhouse that he did a few years before that, or Kill Bill, and you could say, well, the goal of those movies are to exploit violence and to, in Django Unchained, to show like kind of a slave rebellion type of thing. That's one thing. That might be part of the mission, but also like a guy like Tarantino, part of his mission with those movies is to do kind of homages to some of his favorite classic filmmakers, in particular a guy named Sergio Leone. He was an Italian filmmaker, and that's one of Tarantino's like idols, right? So that would be one of his missions, is to kind of do an homage to some of the classic westerns that he grew up with, right? So the mission statement is the mission of the project. Okay, executive summary. Now, just to be anonymous, I took the student's name out. I just replaced it with XXXXX. But the executive summary, you would just talk a little bit about yourself. Remember, it is okay to reuse some of the stuff that you did for projects 1 and 2, well, namely project 2, right? So you may have had like a biography section in there. That's okay to reuse some of that information for here, for the executive summary. One thing to mention here, though, is make sure to write this in the third person. What I mean by that is that you would say, for example, um, you would say, let's just say that Martina is doing this. So instead of saying like um, for the executive summary, instead of her saying like I am an experienced trained composer, you want to get rid of the first person. And it sounds weird, or it's weird to do, but you would actually write in Martina is an experienced trained composer. So you talk about yourself in the third person. It's a little bit weird to do, but that's the standard format for business documents, right? You do it in third person. Same thing pretty much with most business documents, right? You're going to talk about yourself in the third person. Okay, next is the company description. This is where you would talk about the company, right? Not in the mission statement, but here you would talk about the company. Now, the question does come up that, well, if you're just doing a single book or you're just doing a single film and you didn't really have a company in mind, that's okay, right? You can make one up for the sake of this project, right? It can be hypothetical. So let's just say that you are, so let's just say that Christine is doing like a movie, and she just wants to call this, she could call this like Christine Films or something like that. And that's okay to just make one up. I mean, you just need to just talk about a company, real or hypothetical, and just explain where it is. You might just say if this is if this is the first film from this company, you could say, Christine's Films is an online company, and it's an online or it's going to be it's a movie studio, and it's going to be based in Miami Beach, Florida. And at this point, they have this film in development, but they plan to do more or something like that. Just to, whether this is real or hypothetical, you just talk about the company here. Okay, next is the product. So what is the product itself, right? Is this a film? Is this a book? Is this a music project, like a collection of digital songs or a CD? Is this a video game? Is this a magazine? Something like that, right? What is the product? Once again, you can reuse some of the stuff that you did for project 2 in this section. That's okay. Okay, and also, this is the most important part of project 3, manufacturing and distribution. Okay, your manufacturer and your distributor can actually be the same company. What I mean by that is a lot of times your manufacturer is going to be a print-on-demand company, like in this case, CD Baby, right? But they are also going to act as your distributor. So in other words, they will both manufacture your physical copies, and they'll put together digital copies on their website for you. And they will also take on the role of distributor by basically giving the customer physical copies when the CD gets ordered, or giving customers the digital version on their websites or through iTunes, right? So they act as both a manufacturer and distributor. I mean, now, to be honest, these things could be different. It's just a matter of explaining that in your manufacturing and distribution strategy. But in general, though, for most people, the manufacturer and distributor are going to be the same company, which is going to be your print on demand company, right? So this student did a pretty good job. He talks about they're going to use CD Baby, but here's the key thing, though. This student's not just talking about how they're going to use CD Baby, but they're explaining why they chose CD Baby over the competition. So I'm just glancing here. They say, okay, it's $10 more than TuneCore's. it charges more, but it allows the artist 100% of royalties and charges 9% fees. And here, though, this is a key sentence. So the student is explaining why he chose CD Baby. So why he chose it is because the fact that CD Baby counts with 60 digital retail partners, the ability to sell music through Facebook, their music store widgets, and blah, blah, blah. And by the way, these things change constantly. So the information that you're seeing here, like this 49.99 flat fee, that might be different now. So part of the project 3 though is doing your research on that, right? But the point though is that there's the student is explaining which print on demand company he's going to use and why he chose it, and he goes into details about the specifics of the royalty rates, the percentages, things like that. Um, and again, I'm not going to go through the whole section here, but he talks about how much he's going to charge for the album, for the single. Remember, a good print on demand company will give you the freedom to choose that. They're not going to make those selections for you, which is a good thing, right? Because you can set your price. And this is a breakdown. Now, to be honest, to be fair, he probably just took this right from the website, which is fine because um, as long as it's cited, that's okay. But you don't have to include charts like this. But in any case, though, you might, I don't see it here. Maybe I'm missing it here, but you might also want to include the information as to how much you are going to make per unit sold, meaning that this is good here. The student does a good job, but maybe they could have even gone further by explaining like how much it's going to cost to manufacture each disc. Let's just say hypothetically it's 350. So let's just say hypothetically he's making $6 or $7 or something like that per disc sold. He could have mentioned that, right? And then he talks about marketing and promotion. Once again, those of you particularly on team books, I know that for the book proposal for last week, you guys had to have a whole section on marketing. And once again, you can kind of reuse a lot of what you wrote. The one thing I would encourage you to do though is to, for this section, do talk about social media, because I know that some of you already did already with project 2, but really the textbook though, that's kind of what the last few chapters are about. The last half of the book is about this move to from physical to digital. And on that note, from marketing, from the old way of marketing, which was TV ads or newspapers, things like that, and the move from the old ways of doing those things to the new ways, which includes social media. So definitely you want to mention like Facebook, Twitter, Google Plus, things like that. And on this note, also, and now he, before I get to that though, he also includes like a business card or a logo. Well, not a business card, but a logo. You don't have to do that if you don't want to, but if you do have one, that's totally fine. And then just a brief concluding paragraph, right? And before I show you some other examples, let me real quickly mention something that's not in the book, I don't think, but Kim will probably show you on campus students a little bit about this tomorrow. But let me go back up here for a second. With the marketing and promotion, there is something that you might want to consider doing, but I have to warn you though, some people are opposed to this ethically, but there is a marketing and promotion strategy that's known as stealth marketing. What that is basically, it's marketing to people and they don't know that they're being marketed to. So let me give you an example of this. So like if you're doing like for example a movie, if that's your project 3, well, some people, and this is again very very sneaky, a little bit deceptive, and some people have some ethical problems with this, but some people will go on message boards like IMDb, those internet movie database message boards, and they will hype up and promote like certain movies, and people that go on there and read those things, they think that they're just talking to like somebody from the public, right? They just think that they're talking to a regular movie fan, but in reality, that person that they're talking to or that they read those messages from turns out to be a paid marketer. um, a sort of non-entertainment example of this would be, sometimes if you ever go into a bar, you will notice sometimes. Now I know that depending on what state you live, there are a lot of bars now that don't allow smoking in bars. But a few years ago, especially in like New York City, these stealth marketers, what they would do is they would go to bars and they would have their pack of cigarettes out there with them right next to them in the bar. And the whole goal was to have people come up and try to let them bum cigarettes. And they did this because the tobacco company, whatever company it may have been, didn't have a large advertising budget, so they didn't really have the money to advertise through traditional means. And also with tobacco products, some of the laws were there where they were not able to legally advertise in certain mediums. So what they did is they did stealth marketing or undercover marketing, where they just put people on the street. They told them to go to bars, and the whole goal was to get exposure for their brand of tobacco, their brand of cigarettes. And that's just another example of stealth marketing. But you will also notice, especially like on Facebook, where a lot of marketing companies, like a lot of ad agencies, what they'll do is they'll make up fake profiles on Facebook. They'll have avatars, these fake profiles, and what they'll do is they'll go on people's chat boards or they'll go on people's pages, and all they'll do is they'll hype up certain products, right? Now, again, it's deceptive, but that's one thing. It's called stealth marketing. So you can, if you want to actually go to YouTube, you can look up a story that 60 Minutes did on stealth marketing. Just go into YouTube, type in 60 Minutes and undercover marketing or something like that, and you can see a short little video on that. But anyways, though, if that's going to be part of your marketing and promotion, you can put that part in here, right? It's called stealth marketing. Again, though, it's a little bit ethically suspicious, put it that way, because a lot of people don't like it. But in fact, there was a movie a few years ago called The Joneses with David Duchovny and Demi Moore. I don't know. It was a kind of a small independent movie. Not a lot of people saw it, but in that movie, essentially what those people are stealth marketers. It's this family that moves into a neighborhood, and like all they do, everybody thinks that they're like this family with, David Duchovny is the husband, Demi Moore is the wife, and they have these two kids. And they think that it's like, well, it's a typical family that moves into the neighborhood. What the neighbors don't realize is that they are undercover marketers. So what that means is like David Duchovny will buy a new car, and then the next thing you know, all his neighbors think, wow, that's a really cool car. I have to buy one too. Or he'll play golf with his neighbors, and he's got like a special Nike driver or something like that. And he talks about how cool it is and how great it is. And then the next thing you know, all the neighbors, all the people that he plays golf with are buying the same driver. And so they get paid basically to go undercover and try to hype up products, basically. So it's kind of an interesting movie if you haven't seen it. But okay, so let me show you another example here. So that's one example on the music side. Let me show you another example here. Let's take a look at books, right? Once again, I'm not going to go through the content here, but this is just an example that a student did where the title of the book is called Where Did Grandma Go? And once again, the mission statement is about the book. It's not about the company, right? It's about the book. So the goal of the book, the mission of the book, is to seek and educate and enlighten African American caregivers of children about different and real emotions regarding the concept of death. And basically, if you look through a story, I think I remember this now. The book was basically about how to teach your kids when somebody dies, about what happens when grandma dies, right? And that's kind of the theme of the book, or that's what the topic of the book was. And so in the mission statement, what this student is doing is just talking about the mission of the book. What's the goal of the book? And then she talks about herself, executive summary, right? Background, biography, company description. Once again, this can be a real company or a fake company. Then the product itself, which is the book, she lists like the table of contents. And also, this is kind of an interesting project because she, in addition to doing the book, she had like an audio disc that was sort of like a supplemental type of thing. Like not only was this a book, but it was also a music project as well. So she also talks about the 2 disc songs that are going to be on this, like the name of the songs, right? Then manufacturing and distribution. Now, here's the thing. Just looking at this, I can see here that she chose this company here. It's called, I don't know how to pronounce this, Ex Libris. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but anyway, so you'll see here that, wow, my first reaction is, wow, she's spending $3,000 to pay this company. Now, I would just caution you against doing that, because those of you, if you've already done the research on print on demand companies, you shouldn't have to pay a lot of money. In fact, CreateSpace has like, like a $40 setup. TuneCore has like, I don't know, like a $30 setup. CD Baby, same thing. So I would just caution you about this. Now, I guess, though, that's the way that the student wants to do it. I guess it's okay. Remember, there's no right or wrong answer for these types of things in Project 3, as long as you explain what the strategy is. So it doesn't matter if Kim or I necessarily disagree with it, but you have to be able to explain it. And I guess she does a pretty good job of doing that here. Won't go through all the details, but it's a pretty lengthy explanation about what she's going to do. And I get, again, that's okay. I would advise against doing her strategy, but it's okay if you can at least explain what you're doing. That's what you need to do for this section for Project 3, is to explain what you're doing it and why you're doing it, right? Then marketing and promotion, she talks about, an official web page. She talks about what's going to be on the website. She's going to use Twitter. She's going to use radio stations, and so on and so forth. So you get the idea here. And then lastly, though, I would just recommend doing some type of concluding paragraph here. Even if it's just 3 or 4 sentences, just end with a conclusion, just kind of a summary. So that's an example of books. Now, film. Once again, same type of thing here. This student is... Okay, yeah, I think I remember this one now. Okay, so this student, what she was doing was a film called Friendship Never Dies. And once again, if you look at the mission statement, what is the mission of the film? In this case, to present you with imitations of life, which were built on principles of loyalty, humbleness, dedication, patience, and none before God. And if I remember correctly, I think this was about one of her friends was suffering with cancer or something. I can't remember offhand. But anyways, though, the point though is that the mission statement is the mission of the project, in this case, a film. So Martina, that's okay. Oh, that's okay. Yeah, actually, Martina, from what I remember, I think that even though you're online, I think I remember you from MLR back in the day. I think that you're here in Orlando. If that's the case, I hear the storms as well. So it's kind of funny because it wasn't raining earlier today, but then all of a sudden it's just thundering now and storming. So yeah, so so that's okay, Martina. If you want to catch up on this later, I'm going to put this on the archives. I'll put up a link to the YouTube page later, and I'll add this to our YouTube page and also put a link to the session later tonight. So okay, so continuing now. So the student, again, executive summary is about her biography and her degrees and so forth. One thing to point out here that I just thought of, I should have mentioned this earlier, but you will notice that that some of the students for Project 3 do this single space, some do it in double space. There is no format that you need to follow, so you don't have to follow APA formats. So it can be single space, it can be double spaced. The margins don't have to be one, so don't worry about that. So it can be whatever format that you want. Remember, because this is more of a real world type of class where these are the documents that you would put out in the real world, right? We're not worried so much about APA academic essay papers for this one, right? This is it's kind of your own little project here that you're doing that you can go out into the real world with. So, in fact, if you ever do film, by the way, if you get a chance to look at our YouTube page, I did a mini podcast about screenwriting format, and there's specific uh, details that you have to do that are specific only to the screenwriting industry. Like you have to use Courier New fonts, you have to use specific programs that they have. But I won't go into that now. I'll just say if you have any questions about screenwriting format, just send me an email because I've become somewhat of an expert on that um, after taking a couple of screenwriting classes myself this past year. So, but anyways, though, So the student also talks about the company description. This can be real or hypothetical. Then the product itself is the film, what the film is about, the manufacturing. Now this student is using CreateSpace, and she explains it, which is fine. Remember, you can choose any print-on-demand company that you want. Just to go into details about the financials, about the royalty rates, things like that, marketing and promotion, and then a conclusion, right? So you get the idea here. One final example here is a TV show, right? Same type of thing here. Mission statement is about the mission of the show. Executive summary is about yourself. The company is about the company that is uh, producing this show. The product itself is, in this case, it's a reality docu-series for television. What the student talks about, it's going to be based in Atlanta. And actually, I remember this now. This was actually a pretty cool idea for a show. It's it's kind of funny because it's about real estate, and you don't really think about real estate being like a subject for a TV show. But the way that the student lays it out, it's actually pretty interesting. But we won't go into the content here. But basically, though, you just explain what the show is about, manufacturing and distribution. Now, this is a company that I had actually never heard of before this, but that's okay, because as long as you can explain the company that you're using, what they're going to do for you, how they're going to get the show out there, that's fine. Then marketing and promotion, and then just a brief conclusion, right? So as long as you follow that format, remember for all four teams, whether your team books slash magazines, whether your team film slash TV, whether you are team games, whether you are team music, all of you are following the same format. Again, it was different for project 2, right? Everybody had sort of a different format. Each team had their own template to follow. For project 3, everybody's is the same. You just follow these categories here. And so it's the same for everybody. And just the last thing to say is that remember to continue to post on those Google Doc pages. Remember, we don't actually look at those really for grading purposes until the end of the month. But at this point, though, you want to try to get probably some last postings in that you can, right? You want to, we always refrain from giving you a specific number, but try to, if you figure that if we have 14 on-ground classes, uh, try to have a post for each class, which basically comes out to you want to have about 14 posts, right? And also avoid, in fact, you know what, while we're here, let me go ahead here and let me see if, let me just show you an example from last month, right? And actually, you know what? Okay, well, this is weird. For some reason, I think I'm signed in as somebody else, but that's okay. Looks like there is one here. Okay, so this is from a while ago, but you see here, let's take a look here at some of the good things and bad things from this. In fact, I don't know if you on-campus students know Chantel. You guys might remember this group. This is from last year, but I know that Chantel just graduated about 2 months ago. This group graduated about 2 months ago. Um, you see here that they have a lot of links, but this is an example of a good post right here, right? Um, because what you want to do is you don't just want to have links here, but you want to have at least kind of explanation for each link, right? So avoid just putting down just copying and pasting links. You want to find articles, resources that are out there, and in addition to just providing the link here like this, right? That's one thing you want to do, but explain what the link is and why you think it's important, right? And also you can see here that this is also somewhat of a discussion board, if you will. They're talking with each other. Um, Now, keep in mind, this is for the on-campus students, so they all knew each other anyways, so they're kind of being a little bit informal because they see each other every day. So they're talking to each other by name and stuff like that. I mean, for you online students, so you don't really have to do that necessarily, but what I'm saying though is that when you provide links like this, explain why you think the link is important, right? So give a background to each link that you find. And of course, you on-campus students, remember that on Friday, you're going to actually have to present these. So you don't have to like go over what you found before, but you just, pick maybe 3 or 4 interesting ones that you found since the midpoint of the month and talk about those links and why you think they're important or what you found interesting about them and so on and so forth, right? So that's an example of a page from, looks like 2012. Wait, that can't be right. I don't know why it says 1207. It was not that long ago. Anyways, though, this is from a few months ago. So that's an example of a Google Doc page, and I haven't even looked this week at for you guys on the online, but it looks like everybody was doing a pretty good job on those. So before we close this out, before I put this on YouTube, does anybody have any last minute questions? Vanessa or Christine? Okay, great. So just the last thing to say too is that we've had a lot of people come into our class that didn't really ever intend to do any of these projects for real. But guess what though? By the end of the month, they actually did. So even if it's like, 2 or 3 months later, or even a year later, uh, definitely keep us posted if you do this for real, because we always love to hear about when students have their projects become reality. So hopefully, again, the point of this class was not necessarily to get you to do this for real, but to show you how you would go about doing this for real if and when you actually do. Now, some people, like I showed you that example, this student, she was actually doing this for real and is actually trying to get this done for real. So she had, a lot more detail. She kind of had a head start though, but that's kind of the point of this class, is to show you how you would go about doing these things for real when you go about doing them. So if you do do them for real, definitely keep in touch with me and Kim and let us know. And we'll even plug your product if you want. We'll even show other students examples of your work and as examples of what they can do too. So, all right. So I guess what I'll do here is I will go ahead here and I'll close things out. But of course, it is only Tuesday, so if you have any last minute questions, just go ahead and send an email to Kim or I, and we'll get back to you. And of course, you on-campus students will, again, see you tomorrow and also on Friday as well. So let us know if you have any questions. And so other than that, I guess I'll say thank you to Vanessa and Christine for attending, and anybody else that might be checking this out later in the archive. And we'll see you guys later. So good luck next month in your next class with Kristen. You guys will be taking digital marketing, which is a very, very good class, by the way. So you'll be learning a lot. It's one of the most informative classes and also one of the most relevant too it's kind of a good continuation of this class because it shows you how to get your stuff out there even more so than what we have you do in this class too. So it's called digital marketing. So hope you will enjoy that. And once again, just if you have any questions, just let us know. And good luck with everything. And we'll see you at graduation then.